G'day guys and welcome back to another One Piece deck profile. Today we're going to be checking out probably one of my favorite decks out of the format and arguably the best deck in the format, which is Enel. So Enel, mono yellow, for those of you who don't know the effects, let's just take a closer look at Enel. So Enel starts with 4 life, 5,000 power, once per turn on your opponent's turn. When your life becomes a 0, you can add 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life, then you can trash 1 card from your hand. So it's important to note the order of that. So if you happen to have 0 cards in your hand and then you hit a 0 life for the first time, you can still recover 1 to your life, but then you don't have to trash because you don't have anything to trash from your hands. That is the official ruling with that, if anyone has any questions around that. But Enel is really good at like a long stall game, really good at recovering it, and a lot of the other cards that we have here in the deck abuse that kind of recover, manipulate life stuff going on there. Enel can be fairly flexible in its playstyle, but it is usually a bit of a grindy, slow kind of stall kind of playstyle, but there is room to be a little bit aggressive. If you do tweak at the build slightly, you can be a lot more aggressive. Definitely probably Katakuri's the more aggressive yellow leader out of the ones that we have available to us, but Enel is probably, the results speak for itself. It's topped a lot of events that we've had in the OPO5 format here in the English side of things. But without further ado, let's take a look at the build. All right, first of all, we're going to look at our Sky Island package. So first of all, we're just running 2 searches for the Sky Island package, which is Shura. So Shura costs you 2,000 power, 1,000 counter on play. You look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you add 1 Sky Island type card other than Shura, and the rest go to the bottom of your deck in any order. The trigger is you can just play this card, which is really good. There's some cool plays that you can use with some of our bigger boys like Katakuri to get that effect to reoccur multiple times, which is really nice. And you don't need all 4 searches for this deck. Your Sky Island package is not massive, and late game you're looking for your bigger bodies which aren't Sky Island, which you don't want to be bottom decking over and over again with Shura. So just having the 2 copies, is all that you need for this one. So one of your main targets from Shura is Ohm. So Ohm is a 4 cost 5,000 body, 1,000 counter. The effect is, there's 2 parts to the effect. So the overall effect there is if you have 2 or less life, this character gains 1,000 power, so that's both on your turn and your opponent's turn. The on plays, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal 1 Holy, add it to your hand, place the rest of the cards at the bottom of your deck in any order, and then you can play a Holy from your hand. So Holy right here is this one right here, so there's the 3 cost 5,000 power vanilla. So generally speaking, Enel does prefer to go second, so you can play the Shura first up, then you can play the Ohm as your turn to play, and then hopefully you can have a Holy between those 2 searches, which you can then play out. So spamming the board, going a bit wide there, which is nice with that combination right there. And Ohm's really good late game, just because it becomes a 6k body all the time, which is hard for your opponent to deal with. Now, speaking of 6k bodies, the next part of the Sky Island package that we're running a full play set of Gedatsu. So Gedatsu costs you 6,000 power body, 1,000 counter. On play, you can KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost equal to or less than the number of life cards that they have. So typically with Enel, depending on your matchup, you don't really want to swing until you can play out Gedatsu, so you can KO most things. So it's really good into Sakazuki. You can KO their Kuzans, their Luchis, all that sort of stuff quite easily if you don't swing into them. But that does lean into that more slow kind of playstyle. Obviously, you can be a bit more aggressive. And you will kind of nerf yourself on that effect, but it's good against decks that have lots of small little boys like Law, Zoro, stuff like that, where you can still get Gedatsu's effect even though you swing into life. The last of the main cards that you're going to play out of the Sky Island package that we are running is, we're running 3 copies of Enel. So Enel 7 costs 7,000 power, no counter, does have rush. The effect, once per turn, if this character would leave the field, so it's leave in any way, shape or form, whether it's go to hand, bottom deck, KO'd, whatever it is. So whenever that happens, you may trash the top card of your life instead. So that's just once per turn. But this effect is negated if there's a Monkey D. Luffy character on the field. So playing into the lore right there. So Enel, really good just for that rush, is really sticky. There's not a lot of decks that run Luffy. Red's probably the one you're going to need to look out for. And some of the purple decks. So mainly the red-purple starter deck Luffy that runs the big secret Luffy. They're the main ones you're probably going to run into that run Luffy as a character. The others don't really. So most of the time, that protection effect will be live. Right, moving on to our 2Ks. The first 2K that we are running is actually a Skyline one, so it is a searchable 2K of Shura. So it is Satori. 5 cost, 5,000 body, 2,000 counter. It does have a trigger, so you can trash a card to play it. Sometimes that will come up because it is a nice big body. It can just help you spam the board quite nicely there. The next one we are running is also searchable 2K counter of Shura, which is Conus. So Conus costs you 1, is 0, 2,000 power. You're probably never going to play Conus, so the effect it doesn't come into play either because you need to trash a stage card to get the draw effect there. Conus is purely just there as a 2K counter and running 4 because it is searchable. The last 2K counter that we're running, so we're running 12 2K counters in the deck, is Capone. Capone is really good mainly for that trigger. So the trigger is one of your opponent's character leaders cannot attack during this turn. There is some RNG involved in yellow, and this is one of the greatest cards you can see in life, especially late game. Can really save your bacon a number of times. Now moving on to the cards that are purely just there for some defense. It can be a little bit aggro. The first is we're running 1 copy of Elthor. So Elthor is also searchable off Shura. And Elthor is basically a rad beam, but it counts on your opponent's life rather than your life. So the counter is always 2K unless your opponent has 2 or less life, then it becomes a 4K counter. The trigger is you can KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost equal to or less than the number of life your opponent has. The last card that we're running for defense is we're running 3 copies of Sanji. 4 cost, 5,000 body, 1,000 counter. Blocker, has a trigger. You can trash a card to play out Sanji. So Sanji, yeah, really good. Just get the extra body on board. Sanji is probably a bit more of a bait in this deck for removal, especially going into like things like Sakazuki. Otherwise, yeah, you can just become a nice 5K body that can swing a lot. You can get Sanji to reoccur with things like your Katakuri as well. Moving on to just a tech card for the deck, we are running 3 copies of Shirahoshi. So Shirahoshi costs you 5, no power, 1,000 counter. On play, you can draw 3, trash 2. The trigger is just to play Shirahoshi. So Shirahoshi is another card that you can get some repeat value with when it comes to Katakuri, the secret rare, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Really, you don't really want to see Shirahoshi in your hand. If you're really struggling, play it out. Otherwise, it can be something that you can discard with a Nell. Otherwise, yeah, you hope to see it in life and then be able to replay it over and over again a few times with Katakuri. That draw 3 trash 2 is really good because it's not a specific card that you need to add to your hand. It can be whatever, which really helps with basically the rest of the cards that we're going to be talking about in the deck. So moving on to our big boys, we already spoke about Enel, the Russian Enel. The other 7 costs that we're running 2 copies of the starter deck Linlin. It costs you 7, 8,000 power, no counter. On play, your opponent either chooses to give you 1 life or they trash 1 of their own life. So really good when, especially on curve, really good on curve. As we mentioned before, Enel does run into a bit of a grind game, so this card can even come up when it's not your 7 Don turn. Otherwise, if your opponent is on no life, does become a bit of a dead card, but it's one that you can easily pitch for Enel's effect or one of your other triggers like Sanji or Satori. The next big boy that we're running 3 copies of the secret rare Katakuri. So Katakuri costs you 8, 8,000 power, no counter. On play, you can add 1 character with the cost of 8 or less to the top or the bottom of the owner's life. So you can obviously do that with your opponent. If your opponent's got a really wide board, you need to make sure they have 1 less attack. You can play out Katakuri and do it that way. Otherwise, you can pop things like any of these 3 up into your life Shura to get extra search, Shirahoshi to get the extra draw, or Sanji just to be a blocker that you attack with, and you can play back in life and then becomes a blocker again straight away. The next big boy that we are running is we're running a full playset of Yamato. So Yamato costs you 9,000 power. On play, you can KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost equal to or less than the total life of you and your opponent added together. Then if you have 1 or less life, you can add 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life. So really good at just helping you stay alive, extend the game. What Enel is really good at is just living, not dying. There may be many situations where you use Enel's effect, you'll buy yourself an extra attack, your opponent will get you down to 0 the following attack, you play out an Yamato and you go back to 1, and then they still have to get another attack on top of that Enel recovery next turn as well. Now all these cards are fairly hard to remove when they get on field, or 8 or 9k power, or 7 to 9 in terms of their cost. So any deck that has any kind of removal does have to work fairly hard to get rid of them. So when you're coming towards late game, you're going to have multiple of these out on board, which is just hard for your opponent to deal with. And when you've got enough of them on there, you've got enough pressure, you're basically just swinging for game with all the big boys. Moving on to the final cards of the deck, we are running 3 copies of Thunderbolt. So Thunderbolt costs you 2. The effect is you may trash 1 card from the top of your life, KO one of your opponent's characters with the cost of 5 or less, so a great form of removal. The trigger is you can basically KO something with the cost of 5 or less for free. So really, really good to see in live. Generally, you won't use it too much if you see it in hand, unless you're running into a kind of a sticky situation where you need to remove something. Otherwise, can just be used as a discard fodder for Enel's effect or one of the other trigger effects which we spoke about before. And the last 2 cards in the deck, we are running 2 copies of Amaru. So this costs you 2. This is also a Skyline one, so it is searchable or for sure. The effect is up to one of your Lido characters gains 3000 power during the turn. Then if you have 1 or less life, rest one of your opponent's characters with the cost of 4 or less. So for Enel, most of the time you're going to be spending around that 1 to kind of 0 life. So most of the time Amaru is going to be live, but it is really used as a finisher. There'll be plenty of decks that can spam out a bunch of blockers. You can rest them, you can swing in for game that way. The trigger, you may trash 2 cards from your hand and add 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life. So form of recovery there, which is quite nice. As we spoke about, there's plenty of cards which you're happy to discard if you see them in hand. They're a little bit dead in hand. So another great way that helps you extend the life of your game. And there is the deck in all of its glory. Let us know what you think. Do you think an Enel is actually the best deck of the format? I'm probably leaning towards a yes, just by looking at the results that Enel has gotten so far. But yeah, let us know if there's anything you do differently in terms of your version of Enel. But thank you so much for checking out today's video. Stay beautiful, and we'll see you all in the next one.